Hi everyone, it's Catherine here from Inky Fingered Cat. I've got a bit of a different video for you tonight. I've already filmed this intro once. I'm not going to keep that because I sort of got completely lost in the creative process. So I stopped talking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the card I've made. Then I'll put the video of me making it into sort of a speeded up version. It's not going to be super fast forward, so you'll still be able to see what I'm doing. And probably do a voiceover. Not done a voiceover one for a while, mainly because they take so much time and I can't be bothered. But yes, so look, I'm wearing my glasses, which actually don't do my eyesight too much bad. They're for reading and for close up work, so they're not too bad because the camera's not too far away. But yes, this is the card I have made. It's very different for me. So I'm going to do a quick talk through. I have paper pieced the outfits. I have used some templates for drawing the girls, which is from like this little booklet thing that shows you, I don't know if you can even see, but you can see the sort of outlines and stuff, girls in different poses, that you can then draw your own fashion designs onto. I've used the Expressions in Ink paper. There's a little scrap of it left there. I might put some of that inside, but I'm going to do that later. I've used some fabric that's frayed. I've got some bits of ribbon, some gems and some die cuts. And then basically sketched my little fashion girls out. So an explanation why. My daughter's really into textiles and fashion. And it's her birthday card for her 17th birthday. So I think that's a nice 17th. I might end up adding daughter or something, but it's quite late at night now and I kind of need to go to bed. So I think I've come to the end of my creative process here. So I'm going to pretty much leave it. Obviously, photographs and blog will show the final version. So head over to inkyfingeredcat.me if you want to see the final version. Really love this paper with all the gold in it, and feels like a bit of a sacrilege that I've just covered most of that backing paper up, but I'm in a position of use what you've got, don't just, don't hoard. There's a tendency with pattern paper that we tend to hoard it when it's so pretty. But yeah, so I hope you enjoy the process. And I'll now record a little outro with the usual waffly messages on. Okay, so enjoy whatever I end up putting in the middle. Okay, so first of all, I think I might have already mentioned this in the little intro. I chose to use the Expressions in Ink DSP, which is beautiful. It's just so beautiful with that sort of like alcohol ink design. I'd also grabbed some different coloured green vellum. It's like a quadrant piece of vellum, 12 by 12, but I didn't end up using it. So yeah, this is a bit of an interesting thing. I don't normally do the voiceovers anymore. I've not done them for a while, so it'll be interesting to see what actually comes up on the video. I'm not prepared. It's not scripted in any way, so it's my usual waffle. So here I'm just kind of showing you the little booklet that I use for the girls' templates. Clearly I'm waffling quite a lot because I can see my hands going and I'm obviously talking a lot. So here I'm just selecting the 3 different poses that I end up using. And I go through a bit of a process on this. I wasn't entirely sure how to do it, but I wanted to have my templates, have my girls' outlines, and then design some outfits for them. That was my general idea. Just to explain, again, I can't remember what I said in the outro. I'm recording this voiceover a few days later. But my daughter's really into fashion and textiles. That's sort of the things that she's studying at college, and what she's thinking of doing for a future university or career is marketing in fashion and textiles. So green's a favourite colour. That was the other reason. So at this point I'm going, right, what do I want to use as my base? Do I want to use a coloured cardstock? Do I want to do some of the fashion outfits using the DSP, or do I want to use plain cardstock? So I'm grabbing some cardstock from the stash. So I keep all of my Stampin' Up! Cardstock in these sort of like concertina file storage briefcasey things. And they each have a little section for each colour. I'm not a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator at the moment, but I do love the quality of their cardstock, and I love that the colours match the papers and the inks, etc. That's, to me, the benefit of them. Right, so I'm moving on to determining how to work out an outfit. And I decided to use the old method of sort of like transferring the design onto the sheet of paper, or in this case cardstock, by colouring on the back of it with just a normal HB pencil and then tracing over it and hoping that it comes through. And it does, and this works quite successfully the whole way through, to be honest. I don't know if you can see there's a little imprint of the top that I drew, and then I'm just going to cut it out, and then I do pretty much the same for all of it. I use different pieces of coloured cardstock, different pieces of the DSP, and I just design little outfits. So what I'm going to do is pause now. I'm going to speed up. This is already at sort of like 2 times speed. I'm going to speed it up a little bit more because I don't think you probably need me to go through all of it with the same amount of narrative. Okay, so I'm speeded up to about 5 times now. Unfortunately, occasionally I zoomed in thinking that this would be really helpful and you'd see more of the detail of what I was doing, but then do quite a lot of it off camera. So I really apologise for that. I'm really rubbish at, especially when I get creating, I forget that I'm also videoing it. So you can see I've designed a skirt, and I'm going to pop that onto the pattern paper, trying to get some of that beautiful gold in there as well as the different colours of green. And it reminded me of some of the outfits that we'd seen whilst we'd been out shopping a couple of days earlier together, and some of the fabrics that I'd seen there. So I thought, well, actually these are quite fashionable. But what I decide sort of halfway through this process is, this is not my thing. I am not a designing of outfits person, and I'm absolutely not got the same fashion sense as my daughter. But I still am really happy with the final outcome of the card, so I don't think that really matters. So in total, I designed 3 different outfits. There's a top and a skirt, a little dress, what I'm doing here, and then I'll move on and I'll do some trousers and a little top as well. And I think that's probably it in terms of the designing element. The next big challenge is getting the actual images of the girls and having them on the actual card front and the main topper that I create. Yeah, apologies, I've still got quite a bit to do because I've still got all the cutting out of these couple of things. So again, I'm just going to pause and see where we get to. Okay, I've speeded it up a little bit more. So in terms of the colours that I've used, I used I think it's Old Olive. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Old Olive, and I've used Shaded Spruce as my 2 colours of cardstock because they were the closest that I could find in the match to the pattern paper. I'm pretty sure that is the colour that was in there, but I don't have the catalogue anymore to be able to check. As I say, Stampin' Up! Are really good at being able to put the colours in so that everything coordinates. And this is my basic design of, these are the 3 images that I want in terms of the 3 outfits. And now I'm deciding how to get those images of the girls onto the base cardstock. So I decided to go for exactly the same technique. I use the tracing method. It'll be so much easier if you had those sort of like graphite transfer sheets I remember used to have. They were really good for like typing, so you could do duplicate typing type things. They were the days, weren't they? Not press print and do 3 copies. But yeah, instead this is just the quick and easy method. So I'm just tracing the shape. What I would say is my drawing skills are not brilliant. I'm not even very good at tracing apparently. And so some of my images look a little bit odd, if I'm honest. They tend to end up looking a little bit like greys. When I say greys, I mean those sort of aliens. I don't know if people are watching sci-fi type things and they understand what I mean, but all the sci-fi or sort of alien, I'd like to say conspiracy theorists, but I don't know. People who believe in aliens anyway, I think that we've been visited already, call them greys, and they're like the little men, which have got really long limbs, and they're slim and they're grey in colour. Anyway, your typical, what you would imagine when you think of an alien when you look at like Roswell or that kind of thing. Anyway, I'm waffling. So anyway, my drawing skills not brilliant, but I'm quite happy with the final job. They're not perfect, but they do the job. And I have some little tips and tricks on how to improve some of that a little bit later on. What I decide, of course, is that my little outfits need outlines too, in order to feel like they blend in. So I end up going over those and adding little lines and little elements, like you can see there, the boobs and all that kind of stuff, end up being added into. And again, there's some more work that gets done in order to make these make sense as we go through. So again, I've just speeded up the process. We're now at about 7 times speed, I think. But this is just showing you the rest of it. And I do exactly the same process. As you can see, my tracing, I go over the lines, I go under the lines. I'm not very good at these sorts of things. And then I'm even worse when it comes to actually drawing on in the pen. I mean, that arm is just hideous, but you know, it'll all work out, it'll all be fine. And sometimes I've remembered to include some of the body features, like the tummy button. Sometimes I forgot to do that and I have to add them in later. But I'm using those templates as just a general sense. Now, if anyone's got stamps that do this, that would be perfect. If anyone's got stencils that do this, that would be perfect. But in this case, I'm just using what I've got. I got those little booklets. I think they were from somewhere like Paperchase, or might have been from Waterstones, a bookseller or something like that. But I got those several years ago. I've given most of them to my daughter. This is the one that I've got left. Just because they were really handy for things like art journaling, then didn't really do any art journaling. So by this point, we've moved on. I have cut my panel down. So this is now going to be my card topper. And as you can see, it's quite large. It's about 6 inches in length. It's a little bit narrower. And I decide that I want to do a bit of outlining. And I've also decided at this point that probably what I need to do is a much more sketchy look. Because some of my, look, that middle woman has just got one really, really wide arm and one really, really narrow arm. It's just hilarious. So yeah, I've decided that I probably need to do a little bit more work. At this point, I pulled out some pro markers though, and I'm thinking, do I want to add some colour to their skin tones? I'm not 100% convinced about it, so the good news is I was sensible and I did a bit of a test and decided, do I really want... And part of my reasoning when I was doing this was actually, do I want my women to all be white? And do I want some with different skin tones? And I realised I probably didn't really have any other skin tones other than for, Caucasian white people. And that's not fair and that's not appropriate, and it's also not reflective of the girls that my daughter's friends with either. So I decided against it. I also thought, do you know what, I quite like, as I say, this sort of sketchy type look. So I've not at this point obviously decided I'm definitely doing that, but I absolutely am wondering about adding... Sorry, the reason I've pulled that pen back out again is because I'm contemplating adding some shading to some of the dress pieces to show sort of shadow and give them depth and dimension. But I do that, but it's a little bit later. So I stick down my pieces. You can see there that I was sort of indicating that I use high-tack glue. I just decant it into a smaller bottle with a finer nib because I just find that works best. And here you can see I'm starting to think about adding some extra elements. I hadn't quite put the top on straight or in line with a body. And here we go. This is when I start going in and getting really sketchy. And what this does is it basically allows you to sort of get away with your mistakes a little bit better. So it really doesn't matter that you've made one arm particularly wide, because look, I can start to improve that shape. Again, these are far from perfect, but do you know what? I was really happy with how I'd managed to get to it. Yes, I'm not an expert at this. This is not my comfort zone, but the important thing was about getting something that was suitable for my daughter, that was the sort of thing that she might appreciate, and that was attuned with her tastes and her interests. So again, I'm going in, I'm starting to sketchify, I don't know if that's a word, but I've made it up, some of those images. And obviously I'm adding my little outfits and I'm building my little picture. Now I've put my girls quite close to each other, so there is a little bit of an overlap with the skirt and the dress, but I managed to rectify that, having one tuck under the other. And again, I'm just finishing with some of those sketchier lines. And again, I also decided that I probably want to add a little bit more in terms of detail to the outfits, specifically the dress. I add in a waistband and do a little bit of sort of line work just to add some depth to that. And again, later I'll go in probably with a pro marker. I actually use a different pro marker. I use like a light grey. I think it's Cool Grey 2 or something like that, later on, to add in some more depth and dimension. But yeah, this is me just finishing off those little outfits. And then once I'm done with this, I am happy to carry on and start constructing the card. Now, because it's quite a large piece, it does end up, of course, having to be quite a large card blank. I have some already made 7x7 card blanks, so that's what I end up using. This covers the vast majority of it, if I'm honest. Probably should have gone for a slightly larger card blank, but this is what I'd got, so this is what I used. Gosh, I didn't realise I'd done quite so many sketchy marks to the panel. I think that's it. I finally finished. Okay, so my first thing though is I really want to mount this. I really want it to have a border, but it needs to be a really thin border, so I just literally trim it, doing it by eye and making sure it's a tiny thin border, so it's got that border of the green. Regardless of what I end up putting it on, it means it's now feels like it's sort of a finished piece. I alternate between things like my high-tack sticky glue and Pritt stick. I occasionally use double-sided tape as well, but I tend to alternate more between the glues these days. So at this point, I think, yeah, I'm definitely wanting to use some of that pattern paper as my background, and I'm going to cut this so it's just smaller than my card front. And I do end up as well mounting that, but at this point I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it. And I tend to do this. I line everything up straight and then end up putting things wonky a little bit later. I don't know how or why I do that. Oh yeah, I'd realised it was just going to be just that tad too big for the card. So I ended up just trimming it down again. I must admit, re-watching this, I'm looking at that going, oh, there's so many scraps of that beautiful paper. I wonder what I'm going to do with them. They're all still sitting on my desk, if I'm honest. I'm not doing anything with them. So, as I say, I start off usually with something that's quite straight, and then I end up going wonky. So I've already started to go wonky on this point. I had originally thought I was going to do some sewing. So I had pulled out sort of embroidery floss and stuff like that. But I ended up not doing any sewing. What I ended up doing is just including a little panel of the cotton fabric. Here we go. This is where I decide that this also needs a really thin border before it goes on the white card blank. With it having quite a lot of white around the edge of that paper, it felt like it got lost a little bit, whereas this gives it a little bit of a frame, makes it feel a little bit more finished. Okay, I'm happier with that. But as I say, I've brought in this fabric and I'm going to trim it down a little bit more, and I'm just going to I wanted it to be roughly the same size, just a tiny bit bigger than the actual panel. But yeah, I'm going to fray the edges so you've got some loose threads at these sides. I think I end up cutting it down a little bit more again a bit later. But this just adds that little bit of softness into the card. And again, it's that love of the textiles that my daughter's got, and I thought that it would be appropriate for her. At first, I'm just thinking of it as a full-on layer, but I ended up actually just offsetting them so that they become 2 separate layers themselves. Oh yeah, here you go. This is where I just lop off a little bit more and refray that edge. I do end up doing a bit of sticking down quite quickly on this because I think... Do I do it straight away? Possibly not. Yeah, I fiddle with it a bit. The important thing, I suppose, for me was to make sure that it would stand straight, so I didn't want the bottom pieces hanging off. I don't mind it hanging off at the top a bit, but not at the bottom. I obviously didn't stick down. Right, okay, so then I decide on a sentiment. So I've not stuck anything. They're still separate layers at this point, but I decide on a sentiment. So the sentiment I chose was the Happy Birthday die from Stampin' Up. It's a retired one. It's quite an old one now. I actually bought it secondhand as well. And I run it through a couple of times with the shaded spruce, and then I stack them up so it gives them a little bit more dimension. But I don't end up leaving it like that. That does get changed a little bit later on. I use, for this sort of like really delicate type of die cutting, I always use my little dots of the gloopy glue, as I call it, the high tack glue. But yeah, at this point I think, oh no, I want to add in a little bit more of the fabric elements. So I choose some ribbon, and I've got a roll of this old olive ribbon, and I end up using that. But at this point I think actually no, what I need to do is start sticking things down so that I've got some stability and I know what I've definitely got in place. So I start with my background, which as you can see is just tiny bit smaller than the white card blank. And then again, I just stick down the fabric. I use some of the Pritt Stick and then just a little bit of the wet glue, which means I know it's definitely going to stick in place. That'll all get covered up. It doesn't matter that it seeps through because I only put it in the centre part. So I know that that's going to cover it up. So at this point, I think, right, I'm going to add this ribbon, and I decide, yeah, I want them sort of like as little loop flappy bits at the side. So the quickest and easiest way I can think of doing this is to use a bit of double-sided tape. Again, apologies, I'm slightly off camera here because it's towards the bottom. So what I'm doing here is just putting the ribbon backwards and forwards, adhering it to the tape that's already down, and then I'm going to stick some more tape over the top of it just to make sure it's definitely secure. And then that gives me those 3 little tabs of green coming through. At this point, I'm not happy with the sentiment yet, but, oh yeah, so I decide that I want this top panel to be on foam, not to be on directly down. So I'm just using a big piece of children's craft foam, and I'm going to stick it down. I'm using gloopy glue because I know I'm adhering it to that fabric and I want it to definitely stick in place, and that also will seep through the fabric a little bit and adhere the fabric even stronger to the bottom. But as I say, I'm not 100% happy with the sentiment. I feel it gets a little bit lost because it's in that same colour. I did contemplate putting something behind it, and then I decided no, the best thing I think I can do is to use the sentiment die again and cut it out again from white. And again, I do this, yeah, this is me trying to work out, do I want it as something else on the top or do I want it underneath? But I decided, yeah, I'm going to use the white, and I'm just going to cut it out a couple of times and again stack them up. My Stampin', what's it called? Big Shot is a little bit old and it doesn't always cut brilliantly, so sometimes I do have to put another piece of card through as a shim. So you'll see that because obviously I'm cutting it twice. I think my video has slowed down, so bear with me. Okay, I've speeded it up again now. I don't even know what speed I'm on now. So yeah, so I've die cut it twice from the white, and again I'm just going to stack those two together. Again, this is that flimsy white cardstock that I've talked about on other videos, so it definitely needs at least two to be cut together and put together. But what I decide is I want it to just be on a slight shadow. I don't know how well you can see that there. You can probably see it better on the photos towards the end. But that just gives it that little bit of separation from the background, and I'm much happier. So at this point I'm going in and doing that shading I talked about earlier, just adding a little bit of that cool grey pen, and then I'm adding my sentiment, and I decide I want some little gems, just because it didn't feel like a finished card until I put some gems on, and then I'm done. I think that's it. Okay, as I promised at the beginning, I'd do a little outro. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it kind of worked all right, just doing it that way. Might have worked out at a slightly shorter video than some of my create along with me's do. It's taken me just over an hour to sort of make this card, so yeah, probably going to be sped up a little bit. So yeah, please do like if you liked it. Thumbs down if you didn't. It's fine, you're entitled to your opinion. Leave me a comment below. Have you ever done something like a little bit different? I was very nervous doing it, to be honest, but I just kept telling myself the mantra is it's only a piece of paper and can go in the bin. It's absolutely fine if it looks rubbish. It's fine. One point I even said to myself, if it looks rubbish, just make her a card with flowers on, because you know you can do that. But I'm really pleased that this card it's more my daughter, and I'm thinking she'll like it. And it's sort of pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I think that probably the sentiment inside it will be saying, at least you're better at these sorts of things than your mother is, because I'm not entirely sure those are great fashions. Although, do you know what? If I had a figure like these girls, although I did think at one point I was drawing like grey aliens, but yeah, if I had a figure like these girls, maybe I'd wear crop tops and fancy stuff like that. But yeah, so yeah, please subscribe to my channel and if you want to see more, and I would highly recommend clicking the notification bell. I have done more videos this year than I've done for the last few years, but there's no way to say that that's definitely going to continue. I do enjoy doing them. It's just been time and effort disappeared, and I'm not saying I've got time huge amounts at the moment, but I'm making an effort. That's the difference. But I would definitely suggest notification bell, because then it'll let you know when I have actually posted a video, because they're definitely not routine. And that's it for me. So until next time, goodbye.